surveys. But anyway, we're not going to talk about this right now. We're going to listen to Ms. DuMouchel's presentation here. Thank you.
Hi. Okay, can you hear me now? Can you see everything? We're good to go? Right. So when I came on board, this took a while to get fully on board in this. I've been listening to this conversation as it goes on and talking to a few different folks about it, and really just mostly trying to wrap my head around it. So
Leah,
yes.
no one can hear you in the audience.
Sorry, better?
Yes.
Oh, that is much better. Okay, great.
Okay.
So when I came on board, I've been trying very hard to wrap my arms around this and talking to a couple of different folks. But ultimately, I kind of took a big step back, and so what you're going to get here is just my thinking all the way through it. I'm not in any way married to anything I'm about to say. It's just a conversation starter and my way of thinking about it. So, understanding of the issue. I got here, the survey development was in progress. The first thing I wanted to understand was what exactly is the purpose of the survey. It took no time at all for me to realize that I was stuck right there trying to even get my arms around what the purpose of it was. And so I'm going to stop for a second and tell you just a little bit about my feelings about community engagement in general, which are, I'm a community engagement person at our firm. I do it for a lot of projects, and that's because I really, really believe in it. I think what I do as a planner is facilitate the relationship between people in their communities and in the other direction, and this is one of the few opportunities to do that. My firm really believes in community engagement for an equally noble but different reason, which is that it's the only thing that allows implementation to proceed, is good community engagement in the beginning. So that's where I'm coming from. So since I couldn't quite discern the purpose of this survey from the conversations I was having, I just took the objectives that we had from Cobalt and gave them a good look. My thoughts on them. The first objective, to give the Township Board and Planning Commission useful information to guide their decisions. Well, yeah, that's what we would call them for, right? I'm not sure we needed to write that down, but that's definitely what we want to have at the end of it. Questions about demographics and respondents' location. Those were objectives to be dealt with in analysis. Understanding how representative the results we got were. Okay, can we accomplish those? Master plan survey items, which you would include in any good master plan survey. What are the residents' broad priorities, and testing their tolerance for the cost of implementing them, which I think that's an excellent one. Determining support for a specific priority. The two questions about residential housing were on there, and I think, good to have those if you have a direct question on the table. Whether or not the questions that were asked got to it, I'm not sure. And then the questions about determining the relative strength of opinions regarding how people perceive they might benefit from development and preservation. I didn't really, those two questions, and especially the way they were written in the survey, I didn't quite understand what we were going to get out of that. I thought, well, maybe what we're trying to do is understand the conflict a little better. So that's where I started from. This is my understanding of the objectives. We already have some knowledge, and I just love nothing better than some good data to dig into, particularly community engagement data. So I sat down with those two surveys to try and understand, well, what do we already know, so that then maybe we can build smart questions that either continue that conversation or that relate to anything we might have gleaned from understanding them. So some comparisons of the methodology. So the 1994, six? I think it's 4. Anyway, so that survey, the population at the time, 7,340. Number of survey respondents, 242. That's a 3.3% participation rate. The survey itself said it had a 95% confidence bound. Okay. It was a random sample frame and scientifically valid sample size. That's one feature that that survey advertised itself as having. But few demographic questions were asked and no locational questions were asked. So that's what we got in terms of knowledge on that one. For the 2010 survey, contemporary population, number of survey respondents, the participation rate was actually a little bit higher at 4.4%. If you plug that into the survey sample size calculator, it tells you that you also get a 95% confidence bound from that. That's just numbers, though, because there was no scientific sample frame constructed, and so all of these respondents were self-selected. And we'll see that comes up in the respondents' demographics. But more detailed demographic and geographic information was collected. So these are the two sets of knowledge that we have, and plus they're separated by 15 years worth of time. The respondent profiles, So I want to look at this for like just a second here. The numbers you can mostly ignore because we've got the same thing over here. But, well, no, I take that back. It's just the age ones that are right here. So in the 1994 report, they compared their statistics that they got with the 1990 census to establish how representative, in fact, they were. So I said, okay, well, we'll see if I can do the same thing with the 2010 survey and the 2010 census. There were not any really enormous disparities. The homeownership rate was, homeowners responded more highly in the 2010 census, or in the survey. Other than that, they match up pretty well. Oh, and the age disparity. So in here, the orange ones are the 2010 numbers, and the purple ones are the 1990s numbers, right? The lighter color is the census, the darker color are the respondents. And so I just want you to look at the survey respondents. So when we tried to construct the sample size and get a demographic representation across the board. You can see if you just look at the tops of these, we did pretty good. These two cohorts are swapped, but we did pretty well. So then if we look at the 2010 survey versus the census, you can see just a serious age skew going this way. And that's a thing to know, that's for us to understand, but, and to keep in mind. And the other thing I would like to keep in mind is down here at the 18 to 25-year-olds, all we're seeing are census numbers. Like, it doesn't matter how we constructed that so far, we have not gotten their input. If we're interested in it, we might have to find some other participation avenues to capture it because it didn't happen here. So those are the respondent profiles. And then the 2010 survey gave us an awful lot more demographic information. So I just wanted to see, well, can I compare that to information that we already have? I could. So the most frequent response for income, I took the most frequent response here, the percentage of that response, and compared it with any data that we might have had. So in general, the income, 25,000 to 50,000, thereabouts. The percentage of respondents was 22%. The percentage in the township is 27%. That's how I drew those comparisons. We didn't know that for all of them. Just education, employment status. You notice 64% are in the workforce here. Only 51.6% of their survey respondents are in the workforce. That would have to do with the age skew. And there are a couple that I just didn't know because we didn't have the mapping data, but we can find these out if they're important to us once we get the parcel data into our GIS system. So those two, oh, wrong way. Okay, so those two slides were to address the first two items, the demographics questions, and the conclusion that I came to was the questions were asked. Both surveys make valuable contributions. I think that we can say that neither of them is just, junk and must be disregarded. Each has some representative weakness, but it's different in each survey. So what I'm kind of leaning on here is that there's a series of 12 priorities that were, yeah.
They can't read what's on the screen.
Okay.
But you're going to have to move the screen.
Sure.
Because you can't, there's really no way of expanding. Yeah, you guys come on over here. Grab a chair and move around. Yeah.
Am I still moving the screen?
Keep going on the
Okay. Tell me when.
Keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
He says as I crash. Okay, good. Oh, yeah, you guys don't feel so far away now. We can all chat. Good. Okay, so as I was saying, I think that taken together, the two surveys, especially since they did us a favor and asked the same questions so that we can draw a comparison, taken together, I think we can get some useful information out of them. So where the same questions are asked, they constitute a time series that can test changes in opinion, and I think that where they agree, and even though we know we have slightly different populations, that's a strong thing to say. So this, I have it in hard copy because it's important. I'm going to pass it out.
Yeah, well, a little bit. Thank you. Yep.
Okay, so what this is in each of the surveys, there was a list of somewhere between 12 and 15 priorities that folks were asked to rank on a scale of 1 to 5, not very important to very important. And when they were, thank you. Thank you. And when they were summed up, it's basically just an average. 1 point is assigned for a yes or for a don't care answer. 5 points are assigned for a most important answer, and then they just get averaged up. So I was thinking to myself, well, how, and then when you take the two together, they don't have exactly the same. I was thinking to myself, how am I going to represent, just to understand how all of these relate to each other over time. So for the questions that were asked twice on the 90s survey and the 2010 survey, I averaged their score. And then I just lined them all up from top to bottom. I started out with something that was like 500 pixels tall, and I just put them right at whatever. If the score was 1.31, I put it at pixel 131. If the score was 382, 3.82, I put it at pixel 382, just so that we would have it in a hierarchy from top to bottom. So what you're looking at here, the things at the top got the highest scores, the things at the bottom got the lowest scores. Then I spread them out so that you could see them a little bit, and I color-coded them by subject, which is what the key is down here. So what this says to me is that we can see some pretty clear clusters, and that they do in fact emerge. So preserving natural features and agricultural use of land, up at the top here. Second, redeveloping vacant commercial, encouraging commercial development, improving the appearance of the downtown, a little cluster of downtown development. These are enforced zoning and building issues, the sanitary system, the water supply, public transportation. These issues were all over the map. Another little cluster of recreation, encourage walking and bicycling by providing paths, safe public beach, additional parks and rec. And then we have a transportation cluster, improving vehicle traffic flow, and really it's all about traffic flow, and those were mostly only asked in 1994. And then this is the housing section here. So by importance, color-coded by subject, and then just spread out so that we can see them all. And I'm going to slice this and dice this a couple of different ways. So there it is, all at the beginning. Here are the ones that were only asked in 1994. They did not show up again in the 2010 survey. I assume that that's because it's either already done, as in the case of regulations permitting residential development, cluster development regulations, or it was so low that we just gave up on it altogether, the additional golf course development. Or I'm not sure if we just think that the traffic is already fixed or if we're not worried about it anymore. So that's what I took from there, that these are either no longer important or they would have made it under the next survey, or else they have already been accomplished. Next, I looked at the things that were asked on both surveys, the 1994 and the 2010. And what I wanted to see there was there movement? Did anything change? For most of them, for all of these that have boxes around them, the score in 1994 was not statistically different from the score in 2010 by the 95% confidence bound. So I feel, and this is me and you are free to disagree, but I feel pretty confident that these priorities pretty well reflect what has been asked of the citizens, because they said the same thing 15 years apart. Slightly different groups of folks said the same thing 15 years apart. Providing additional public parks and recreational areas, that was the only thing that decreased in its score, and it dropped one one margin of error, basically. That's what that one means. It's not 1 point. And it dropped in the ranking from 6th to 12th. And then the remaining items all increased their scores, although this is the only one that really moved very much in the order of ranking. So providing additional space or incentives for industrial development moved from 15th on the list up all the way up to 6th. That was 7 margins of error. And then these two at the very bottom both enjoyed some increased support, offering public transportation to and from Ann Arbor and reducing the minimum lot size requirements in areas planned for agricultural use to permit additional residential development. That occupied the same position in both lists, even though more people said it was important. Sorry? So, so then the statement would be, how important do you feel it is to reduce minimum lot size in order to blah, blah, blah. So if you said it was not, and most people said that is not important. So then these are the things that were only asked in 2010. And I assume, and I don't know this because I wasn't here when the questions were written, but I assume that these particular things were chosen to ferret out the question of where we want more growth from, because they're largely limited to redevelop vacant commercial and encourage commercial development in a cluster of, I think what this cluster was trying to do was to suss out if there was any particular kind of housing that we felt was necessary in the township. Pretty low on the list, pretty high on the list. So here's the whole thing again. And the master plan survey items and the determining support for a specific priority objectives. My assessment is that we do know which features of the township are most important to residents and the relative strength of their opinions. Broadly speaking, residential development has limited support as a priority, but tolerance for the cost of residents' priorities has not been answered. And it should be. If a survey is to be done, that was absolutely something that should be included as an annex to priority questions. I know, you don't have that one. You just have the ones on the list where it was important for you to see them. So here's the beginning of my analogy here. To me, we have clusters, we have some cohesive ideas, but they are all pulling in different directions. I'm a little worried that downtown development and recreation are passing in the night, and preservation and residential development are kind of on a collision course. And I think that by treating these things as a whole and really always keeping in mind pulling in the same direction and not crashing into or missing each other, maybe we can make some tweaks that will go further to, I don't know about if we can make everybody happy, but at least making many folks less angry. So I just found this on the internet when I was looking for pictures of horses, but does that look like it or what? I mean, that's from Minecraft if you have children. Or worse, this one. I mean, horses going in the wrong direction, not cool. And then finally, we get to the conflict analysis, determining the relative strength of opinions and identifying other reasons why people oppose or support more development. My thought is one cause of conflict is likely simple frustration over this wasted horsepower. Like, people are involved and they are being involved in their communities, but when we're pulling in opposite directions, why aren't we going anywhere? And that makes anybody crabby. It makes me crabby. Another source may be the mismatch between the residents' priorities and the township's recent focus. I think that sounds blamier than I mean it to be. It is, of course, the township's job and the planning commission's job to consider everything that comes before it, and it's an okay thing to do. I think it's certainly maybe also a source of friction. Cobalt's questions about this appear to be identifying specific desirable or undesirable aspects of residential development, presumably to address them directly. Those are the questions about what are the 3 best arguments against residential development, those ones which I wasn't quite sure what to do with on this survey. I get where you're going. I don't know if that's the best way to get there. That's my assessment of those objectives and the treatment of them. So, to sum up, the previous surveys, I think, were constructed well enough to offer actionable data. Were they perfect? No, but I think that they say something. Resident priorities have been broadly determined, in my opinion, and the top 3 priorities are natural features, downtown development, and recreation. Residential development does not appear to be a strong enough priority to justify amending the master plan at this time, and again, does not appear, and that's my opinion. And specific questions remain for which community input would be valuable. So I don't think this is in any way the end of the community input question. But community engagement tools other than a survey may be appropriate to gather that particular data. And so now, since I have just spent all this time wrecking months worth of you guys' work, I'm going to at least offer a few next steps. Just in the areas of natural features, downtown development, and recreation, I just took a look at, and you guys have this one too, because that's also important, and I wanted you to be able to take it home with you if you want. So my understanding of the current status of natural features planning and attention in the township is the Huron River Watershed Council coming for the Green Infrastructure Workshop results, which is wonderful. We have already requested to have their data, and we'll gladly add all of anything that we have to it to begin to develop an ecological asset map to understand the places in the township that have value that we would need to calculate if we were going to impinge upon it. There is no good data on agricultural resources in the township, although we know they exist, and that doesn't surprise me. There's not really good agricultural data everywhere. My firm just did a food and farm assessment where we really went into the community, knocked on doors, went to farmers markets, and really understood what the agricultural activity was in the township. It was labor intensive, but the data was worth it, and if we think we have something to preserve, we would certainly want to know what that is. And this priority enjoys the support of advocates. So my thoughts on community engagement with that are an agricultural asset inventory could be conducted to obtain that data that's lacking, and this is a task that is remarkably well suited to a group of dedicated volunteers. Our desired outcome would be to mostly have a general understanding of the spatial location of the township's most valuable natural resources. So right now, maybe 80% of the township is undeveloped. We're probably not going to preserve all of it, but let's make good decisions about what we really, really want to save. Downtown development. My understanding is that a downtown master plan process is beginning, and it's not expected to be handled by the PC or its staff for budgetary reasons, although I am hoping that contributions will be welcome so that we can all pull in the same direction. And the purpose of the plan, as I understand it, is to develop a unified vision that will then enable implementation, and it's the unification that enables the implementation. Community engagement, for that, can be really anything you want. It has the potential to be the highest profile project that the community ever undertakes, but then all downtown projects are. They are any community's center and jewel, and if you do a big project in it, that's as high profile as it's gonna get. The level of community involvement must be commensurate with the plan's ambition, and that is what I would really like to leave you with in this section. If we want to make great big changes downtown, then we need a well thought out and diverse community engagement strategy. If we want to make smaller incremental changes, then that is not so necessary. But when we're thinking about how ambitious we want to be, I think we need to take the citizens right along with us. And citizen contributions to the establishment of major priorities downtown and to the conceptual designs will be critical to implementation, because we all know it takes so much work to get everything done. People have to want to put some work in. And the desired outcome there would be an agreed upon vision for a revitalized downtown and a realistic action plan to implement it. And finally, recreation. I learned just before this meeting that I was not quite clear on where you were in the recreation planning process. You're actually most of the way done with it. I thought you were much earlier in the process, so I'm going to tweak this a little from what's on the screen. But the update, the 5-year recreation plan is presently being updated, and if we're considering public access to the lake, that makes recreation planning almost inseparable from the downtown planning. Just again, to have those horses not crash into each other, not pass each other in the night, get all the bang for our buck we can from both of those efforts. Community engagement, which I assume you're maybe past that process. Some form of it's necessary. They're pretty broad in the guidelines. And I just wanted to point out that the MDNR doesn't mind if it's tied with other efforts. We've used part of the master plan survey as it, and in fact, they find that valuable, that plan alignment. And the desired outcome is more bang for the buck, a synergistic relationship between recreation planning and general planning efforts to all head in the same direction. So hopefully, that's my cute I spent a long time on this. Hopefully, those 3 horses can get the township to the next master plan update, where the next items are waiting for attention, as they've been, chronologically described by the residents. And then, who doesn't like a picture of Secretariat running by 35 lengths? And that's what I had to say about the surveys. Can I answer any questions for you?
Go ahead, Mr. Dignan.
In the process of you going through and evaluating this and putting this information together, what resources from the township did you utilize? Were there staff members involved in giving and helping you with this, or was this an independent project taken on by yourself with 2 surveys alone?
This
Or was
was
there a planning commission, were any of the planning commission members involved at all in providing you information, or the staff?
Obviously, I received the copies of the surveys from the
Sure.
township and from the staff. All of the analysis was done at my desk, all by myself.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. No?
Anybody else? Questions?
Can we get this full packet emailed to us now that you have this completed so that we can take time, digest it, review it?
Absolutely, and I was actually had asked before if I could get it up on the township's website, so anybody is welcome to use it to have it to study it.